to see if we are on. So what is it saying on your end?
It's showing that we are good to go.
Okay.
Hello, Dr. Rachel. How are you?
Hello, Dr. Alexis. I am very well, thank you. Bit tired, but otherwise I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. I'm really well. Thank you. You managed to maintain your consistency no matter what. I have noticed that, and it's a beautiful strength. So you can bring whatever you feel into this space, as I'm sure you would encourage others to do.
I would. I want to acknowledge that we weren't here last Sunday night. A couple of people contacted me and said, "Oh, we went looking for you last Sunday at 5." And yes, apologies that we missed last Sunday, but we're here today.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah. And do you want to let people know what our topic is today, Alexis?
Thank you, Rachel. I would love to do that. We're talking today about intergenerational trauma. Now, many people have an experience of trauma in their lives. Intergenerational trauma, however, is specific in that it relates to being passed down from parent to child specifically. So you have a bit of a definition on intergenerational trauma. Is that right, Rach, that you could share?
Well, I was just looking at the Wikipedia page earlier, and the reason for this topic is we had a post earlier in the week that was very popular. Feels like an inappropriate word, doesn't it? Because it was a lot of people gave the sad and the care reacts. But I'll read the post from Caitlin Johnston, who says, millions of highly traumatized men came home from the world wars, then started families and poured their trauma into their children. That trauma has been passed down to subsequent generations. That is the real lasting legacy of those wars, not the stuff in the movies. And there was a lot of shares, a lot of reacts, and a lot of comments on that post. So my social media person suggested that we make our next video on this topic, and more generally on the topic of trauma, of what trauma is, how there's almost, you'll find almost no human being on the planet who hasn't experienced some kind of trauma. So to kind of normalize it, give a definition, like you said, and then talk about what we can do with trauma. I wanted to just say though, Alexis, you and I bonded early in our friendship over this book, you would remember.
I do remember very well. Yeah, he rates very highly for both of us, I think, for his body of evidence, his work in trauma, and specifically as we can deal with trauma through the body. Yeah, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, he's a hero for sure.
The Body Keeps the Score. I'm wondering if anybody who's listening in has read this book. I'd love to hear your comments and reactions to The Body Keeps the Score book in the comments below. So I'll keep checking for those. But yeah, he very much talks about the neuroscience, doesn't he, Alexis, of how our body holds on to our experiences, onto our trauma, onto our unresolved emotional reactions to the world, and what we can do about it. But let's go back to the first topic, which is intergenerational trauma. And I'll just give the definition here on Wikipedia. It mentions collective trauma as the psychological trauma experienced by communities or groups as carried through the collective memory. So we often see this in minority groups, survivors of war, Holocaust survivors come to mind, residential school survivors where there's been systematic trauma. And then there is the trauma, as you mentioned, passed down through families from individual parent to child, the children of those parents. And there's three mechanisms for this transmission of trauma from adult to child. One is through direct behaviors, so social transmission. So being on the receiving end of the behaviors of the parent or the adult, which they've acquired along the way as a mechanism of coping with life, if we could put it that way, however strange that might sound. So through behaviors, through the effects of stress in the womb before birth, and also through stress-induced epigenetic modifications. So we now have some rat research, which is why I put pictures of rats in the image this morning when I announced the Facebook Live. There's some experiments on poor little rats where they took the female rats away from their mothers at birth, raised them in isolation, which is obviously very stressful for a social creature like a rat. And the great-grandchildren of those mother rats were still showing signs of being highly stressed individuals, and the expression of their genes was such that the researchers could pick up the epigenetic effects on their temperament through their behavior from having had a great grandmother who'd been traumatized. So we know that trauma affects the expression of our genes because of the elevated levels of cortisol and adrenaline from an early age, even sometimes in utero. So they're the three mechanisms of intergenerational trauma.
And it's worth mentioning at this point, Rachel, that we are all affected. As you said earlier, there's not a human being on the planet that isn't. And I noticed even for myself, once we had decided on this topic, I have recognized some kind of dissociation that's been happening within myself around this topic.
Yeah.
I would even suggest at this point for ourselves and our listeners that we even just take a moment to breathe and associate with the body and acknowledge trauma, even acknowledge that there's intergenerational trauma that's come about here on Australian soils for the fact of colonisation, for stolen generations, and that this does affect us all deeply. So, yeah, if you'd like to join us, feel free to lower your gaze or even close your eyes down so that you can heighten your interoception, that is your experience of your body at a sensory level. According to researchers in the trauma space, the body is essential for healing, processing, and resolving trauma. And the simple act of paying attention to our experience, recognizing the sensations, and you can give words or language to yourself in terms of what it is that you're noticing. For example, I notice today that there's a kind of a waver in my body, a vibration, I would say. And we can use the breath to help drop low, drop into the center of the body, and even drop into the lower body. So that together, just for a few breaths, we can take the inhale into the abdomen, and then you can release your exhale down through your legs as though you're breathing out of your feet. I invite you to continue with the next couple of breaths with an extra dose of compassion for yourself, in acknowledging that we are all affected deeply by these experiences.
Yeah.
I quite like to close a simple practice like that by rubbing my palms together and using my own hands in some contact with my body, whether it is the arms or even squeezing to the thighs. Yeah, the face is another lovely place.
Just that anchoring yourself to yourself through breath and through physical pressure and touch can be so soothing sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know about you in clinical practice, Rachel, but I've certainly found anytime there's even a subtle awareness of trauma, there is a need to firm up that connection with self, and find that place to stay rock solid.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I don't actually think we can treat trauma as psychologists without addressing the body-mind connection. There are various practitioners around, such as yourself, Alexa, such as myself, who take, somewhat different approaches with trauma. And I think we need it all because, trauma is stored in the mind and the body. And I'm very clear these days that without addressing the way in which the body keeps the score, we can't really address trauma. I was off the back of that beautiful meditation and reminder, thank you for that reminder. I just want to read something from Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, from page 97. And he says this: traumatized people feel chronically unsafe in their bodies. The past is alive in the form of a gnawing interior discomfort. Their bodies are bombarded by visceral warning signs, and in an attempt to control these, they often become expert at ignoring their gut feelings and in numbing awareness of what is playing out inside. They learn to hide from themselves. So this notion of feeling unsafe inside your own skin.
Yes, I'm so pleased you raised that. And, from my research into public policy around trauma, because Australia is lagging in the policy space around trauma, but in America, trauma-informed policy is it's really the expected norm in organisations.
Yeah.
And safety is really the number one premise of addressing and acknowledging trauma is the need to provide a safe environment, a safe space.
Absolutely, because trauma occurs when, there is a lack of safe connection. Perhaps a connection that felt safe becomes unsafe, or perhaps there's an overwhelming experience. Somebody asked, what are the triggers of these traumas? The triggers of these traumas can be a whole range of things. We often used to think of trauma, didn't we, Alexis, as, a car accident or coming back from war, what they're calling shock trauma. But we know now that there are many more forms of trauma than just shock trauma. Of course, those traumas still happen. People are still obviously traumatized from accidents, from disasters, from war, from witnessing something really shocking. However, if trauma is what happens inside your mind and body, and it's an experience of being overwhelmed and feeling very unsafe and not knowing what to do, being under-resourced. So, an overwhelmed nervous system that, hasn't got any resources at its disposal to know, what do I do now? How do I fix this? How do I help myself? How do I make this right? So when we think of children living with abuse, whether it's sexual, physical, or psychological, and there's no way out, or they can't see a way out, then they are in overwhelm and without the resources they need to keep themselves safe. So then they live with this chronically unsafe feeling. So yes, safety is paramount. It's number one. And in therapy, as you would do, I do, one of my first goals is to build a safe connection with my client.
That's right. That's exactly right, Rachel. And that alone is quite a it's quite a sophisticated, and it's not such an obvious thing to provide safety. It revolves around not only the relationship between the practitioner and the client, but the environment, the sense of structure that surrounds someone, I think is critical. And that's again where I would strongly encourage any practitioner who is working within the space of trauma to use SAHAMS's policy, because it does provide that construct that it's almost like an unconscious sense of safety. And I've found that my clients, especially those who've experienced trauma, have a very attuned radar to this sense of safety. And whether that's, through sound or even smell, touch, it's almost like they're hyper vigilant to, am I safe right now? Am I safe right now? And I encourage these clients to use that as a strength.
Yeah.
I would encourage practitioners working with clients in the trauma space to use this policy. SAMHSA stands for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. And yes, they are an American-based organisation, but they are considered to be the authority, the governing body on public policy in trauma-informed care. And they draw on six...
Sorry, you can go. I just wanted to say it's brilliant because it sends the message to, it starts to get the message out there, these policies, that trauma happens. It's actually really a very, very common and universal human experience. Most people have some degree of it. Some people have a lot, unfortunately, and that it's real. We can't see it, but the effects go on and they're real. We didn't know this until 5 minutes ago in our society.
That's right, especially in Australia. It's really very new, very fresh. And I think it's becoming more vocal, which is a wonderful thing, but it means that more and more of us need to be across these kind of policies so that we can bring it into our organisations, and we can bring it into our homes even. And certainly as practitioners, we can provide that really strong structural safety that is necessary for somebody who is highly attuned to it to feel open enough to resolve. Because again, my experience as a practitioner has been that I can't resolve someone's trauma. Really, all I can do is provide safety at a very subtle level. And then when someone's ready, it's a natural thing, because healing, I fully believe inside each of us, we are all seeking a sense of wholeness. We're all seeking a sense of resolution. And my experience has been that with safety, a client will find their own way. Incredibly creative, the mind. People will find their own way to resolve what it is that they need.
Yeah, and even the symptoms, what we call symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, is already the mind and body trying to find ways to create safety. Now, they may become maladaptive in that in the long run, they may not serve the person, but I still always honor these symptoms and these coping mechanisms and survival strategies of the body and the mind. No matter how unhealthy they've become or isolating they've become to the person, I still honor them as the body trying to restore a sense of protection and safety to itself, but it's just not working anymore. That's
interesting. So you're saying that there is a seeking of safety, and at some level that has there's a healing in that, even if there may be maladaptive styles, let's say, whether
yes,
but even seeking of substances, while a maladaptive approach is still at some level seeking the physiological safety.
Yes, some sort of protection for the self. The classic example, and it's always going to be in there somewhere with trauma responses, is dissociation. Now, dissociation is really the mechanism that makes us go numb so that we don't feel too much pain. And it's the freeze response. It's a survival mechanism. And the thing about dissociation is it is our brain and body trying to protect us from more pain and from the ongoing feedback loops of pain and distress and stress. But the problem is, talking about intergenerational trauma, and I've seen this in my clinic. So someone has a baby, a traumatized woman who's fairly dissociated much of the time has a baby. And then in the mother-child bonding phase, her dissociated state is maybe was kind of working for her to get through her life before, just going to work, paying the bills. But now with the baby, being dissociated isn't good for the bonding process between mother and child. So this is one of the ways that Kirsten Louise made a comment that transference trauma is also what it's called sometimes. So the trauma transfers from mother to baby, not because she's doing anything yucky to her baby, but just because her dissociated state means she's not bonding with the baby. And babies are naturally looking for attachment, looking for that bond, and it might not be forthcoming from a mother who's still in a dissociative state. That's a classic example, and I've seen it many times. And so, you know, we might talk a bit about how mindfulness can help us, Alexis, with coming out of the freeze response, coming out of our dissociation. And there's no shame in being dissociated, of course, as I've implied. It's just what the body does. But before we get to that, there's a question from Mia Mount. I wonder if you could answer it, Alexis. Do you mind if I read it to you?
Please do.
So Mia says, when we realize that trauma is stored in our body, for someone who can't stand to be touched, even by themselves much of the time, how can a person break through that? Physical touch is so important for us to feel connected, understood, and safe. But for someone who is reactive to touch, feeling it like a shockwave pulsing through their body, will that ever just go away?
Mia, yes, thank you. Yes, this can be healed. I can assure you this. Touch is not just an external touch. You've already acknowledged the touch of yourself. There is the touch of the shower on your skin. There's the touch of the air. There's the touch of your own breath. Touch is my simplest form of connection, but I've seen that it's not as simple as it might sound. So if a particular form of touch is uncomfortable for you, I would start with something that's really gentle, something that you experience as soft or kind, something that feels nurturing. That could be as simple as the experience of your own breath, and we will practice this together in a moment. And it can be as simple as using your awareness, using your mind to sense your own body. And I've had some very beautiful, deep and intimate experiences with clients for this very purpose of familiarizing and opening to touch. And I've seen some really wonderful results just using these simple approaches of the touch of the breath, the mind on my own body, and just growing a little bit more familiar with my own experience so that I can experience safety in my own skin. And when I can experience safety in my own skin, then I can receive others as also being safe. Rachel, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. That's it's, you know, one of the other things that trauma does to us physiologically and mentally is it makes us feel out of control of ourselves. We lose a sense of our own self-efficacy. We not only don't trust others for the most part, we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our own ability to handle our own reactions. And there's various names for this in psychology: self-mastery, self-efficacy, and self-leadership. They all mean very similar things. So I wanted to read this quote from, obviously I can't say enough about this book. And I noticed that one or two people said it's a fascinating book. Few of my clients have read it. So I'll stop banging on about it now. And I'll just read you a quote about self-leadership from the chapter on self-leadership.
While you do, I'm just going to stop my video because I need to plug in, but please, I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Okay, good. You'll still be able to hear me then.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So, the cultivation of mindful self-leadership is the foundation of healing from trauma. Mindfulness not only makes it possible to survey our own inner landscape with compassion and curiosity, but can also actively steer us in the right direction for self-care. All systems, families, organizations, can operate effectively only when they have clearly defined and competent leadership. The internal family system is no different. Now, this is the idea that we've internalized our family members and perhaps down through the generations. And he says that the internal leader must wisely distribute available resources and supply a vision for the whole that takes all of the parts into account.
Wow. Wow. Rachel, that's quite incredible, that quote. That rings many bells of resonance for our retreats.
Yeah. What comes up for you when you hear about this self-leadership concept?
Yeah, as you said, self-efficacy, but even at a more basic level, self-regulation. And it brings to mind the confidence I've seen people on our retreats build through self-awareness, almost like the ability to recognize themselves has given them a sense of control and confidence. Yeah, leadership is a great word.
Well, yeah, and this is what and of course our executive leader in our mind often goes on holidays. Don't worry about it. There's no perfection here. We all struggle with executive functions when we're tired, very stressed, But the idea is this is what we're working on. We're working on self-efficacy or self-leadership. I want to just say one more quote this is from actually Richard Schwartz, who says the internal system of a traumatized person differs from the non-abuse system with regards to the absence of effective leadership and extreme rules under which the parts of the self function and the absence of consistency, balance, or harmony. Typically, the parts operate around outdated beliefs and assumptions we derived in the childhood abuse, believing, for example, that it is still extremely dangerous to reveal secrets about our experiences which were endured. And I see this a lot. This is the shame thing we talked about a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, trauma can lead to shame, and then shame prevents us from talking about the trauma. And so we get stuck in this loop where we don't speak about it to receive the safe connection and the empathy that we need. So whether someone goes to see a psychologist or a body-based practitioner like yourself, Alexis, the safe connection is so essential to feel that if they do want to speak about their experiences, either current or past experiences of their trauma, that they can do so without fear of judgment or shame or anything like that, so that we can start to restore a sense of innocence. The body is innocent. It's just doing what bodies do. And anyone who's been victimized or traumatized was innocent. Now, I want to go to some questions and love your thoughts, Alexis. Sarah asks, can somebody ever fully heal from trauma, or do we only learn to manage the impacts? What a great question. Do we ever fully heal from trauma or just learn to manage its impacts? What's your initial thoughts on that, Alexis?
My initial thoughts are that such a big question that I feel, I don't know if we ever fully heal from anything. It brings to mind that life is a process of healing and ongoing healing, and that's what makes the process so valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love that
how
answer.
about you?
Yeah, I love that answer. I think that we come onto this planet, into this body, into this form, and life is going to be hard. And some of us are going to be thrown challenges this big. Some of us are going to be thrown challenges this big, but there's no life without challenges. And, there's this beautiful quote, actually. I'll just have to paraphrase it because I don't have it at hand, but it's from Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And he says that, yes, trauma reminds us that human beings can do terrible, horrible things to each other, and that we're all sort of sensitive to trauma and vulnerable, but also it shows us time and time again about the incredible resilience, and you said before, Alexis, the creativity and intelligence of human beings as well. So I agree with you. I think we're probably always in some sort of process of integrating and healing, hopefully till the day we die, really, because otherwise, what are we doing? We never kind of get to wipe off our hands and say, I'm done now, because then you'd stop learning, you'd stop growing. That's my answer.
And we also stop relating.
And stop relating. Yes, exactly. That's a great question. Kasha Break asks, can one attach wholeheartedly with others, such as your own kids, but never fully attach to yourself? That's another great question.
What do you think, Rachel?
I mean, I think it's a fairly intuitive, like when I say this, people will have a really intuitive sense of this. It's much easier for most people to have compassion and empathy for others who they love than for themselves. That's why one of the really classic exercises in cognitive therapy is to imagine a friend or someone you care very deeply about, and imagine how you would treat them, and imagine what you would say to them if they were struggling with something very similar to the situation you're in. Because, see, we're often very kind to our friends or our children, and we say things like, hey, you're doing your best, you're only human, don't be so hard on yourself, you'll get through this, I believe in you, you're doing a great job. But we don't speak to ourselves that way. We're really hard on ourselves, most of us. And so, yeah, I think it is possible, Kasha, that we may actually have a kinder, safer, more compassionate connection or attachment with others than we do with ourselves. I think that actually is a thing. And I think that therefore we need practices to sort of mitigate this. I think we need practices like self-compassion, and we need to be discerning about who we have around us. Other people in our lives, generally, no one's perfect, but are they generally empathic? Do they generally have our best interests at heart? In fact, that's the question I usually ask. If you're taking an audit of your life, who in your life really has your best interests at heart? They may not be perfect. They may mess up sometimes. They may overreact. They may shut down. But do they have your best interests at heart? And if you find anyone in your life who doesn't, then, that's really worth looking at. If that relationship's not serving me, do I have options? Can I end that relationship? Because the attachments that we form with others will reverberate back into us. Yes. Attachment theory tells us this.
I can't support you enough in what you've just said. This has come to mind numerous times since we chose this topic, on reflection of my own experience of trauma and how I moved out of that. My amygdala was very overreactive, not that long ago, really. And connection with others, but specifically connection with those who were steady and calm and empathic was a critical part of my process. Absolutely. I feel 100% clear that there's no way I could have moved out of that traumatic response. It was an unconscious bodily response.
Yes.
That I could see I was trapped in. It was the body just acting out of trauma. And I am quite confident I would still be there today without people around me who were calm and steady and empathic. I believe that we do hold each other in that space, a kind of a co-regulation or a social regulation.
That's right, the co-regulation thing. And so if anyone listening is paying to see a therapist of any type, whether it's a psychotherapist or a massage therapist or a physiotherapist or someone who's trying to help you, heal or self-regulate, check that relationship. Do you feel safe? Do you feel held? Do you feel seen? For the most part, we're all still human beings, don't forget. But, do you feel that that person has empathy and is a safe connection? And if not, try somebody else, right? Because we've all had to pay for support. I've had therapy. I've had to pay for, emotional and psychological as well as physical support in my life. We all do. Choose wisely those practitioners, and choose wisely your friends, and even choose wisely how much time you spend with family members, when you have some choice about that, if it's not a safe empathic sort of connection. Now, I've got another question from Katie, who says, I'm starting to see this in my 13-year-old daughter, where her bodily memories are stronger than her mental memories. Yes, that's so common. From her dad towards me when she was about 6 or 7, when we left him. As a result, many feelings associated with nervous, sort of butterflies in her tummy, apprehension, result in feelings of terror. So yeah, I can see that trajectory there. She can feel her heartbeat in her tummy. I'm trying to work out how to unpack this while staying in the present without giving her new information that, yes, she probably isn't ready for. Any advice for working with young people? We experience huge trauma bond that's taken us a long time for her to feel safe without me. Yeah, that's quite common too. I had thought to remove her from the situation would be best, when it actually did, wasn't together, something bad will happen to me. Yes. So I see she's had that really clingy sort of anxious attachment. Sounds like you've worked really well with her to build some efficacy in her, that she's okay to kind of leave your side. You'll still be there when she comes back. But yeah, what to do when a teenager's trauma is very much in her body rather than conscious memories. What are your thoughts, Alexis?
Thanks, Rachel. Look, I keep coming back to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration's 6 key principles. So I will read those out because I think they're applicable for working with all ages, and for parents even working with their own children. And their approach is just based on 6 key principles. As I mentioned earlier, the first one being safety. And so you've done a beautiful job as the mother to provide that safety. That is a huge part of the process itself. And to maintain that safety, I know it has taken years to create a home for my children that I feel is very, very safe. So I understand what lies ahead of you, but you can do that. Your home is your domain, and you can build that safe environment for you both. The next key principle is trustworthiness and transparency. And this absolutely applies between parents and child. That connection of even as simple as showing up when you say you're going to show up, that is building trustworthiness and transparency. And as you've already demonstrated, you're connecting with her around her bodily sensations, the butterflies, the heartbeat in the tummy, the apprehension. It sounds that, in fact, there's already a lot of trust already there. And transparency, same thing, that you're not keeping anything from each other. The third principle is peer support. Now, these guidelines are written for practitioners, because practitioners absolutely do need supervision and colleagues to connect with, to debrief with, to get feedback from. But it applies also to parents, because you yourself will need a very strong support network to resolve your own trauma. So please draw on your peers. For windows of time, I think it's not asking too much to ask your friends to be available. Even if it's for a transition period where you say, look, I'm in transition. Is it possible to be available to me 24/7 if you need that? For 3 weeks, I know as a friend, I would be more than willing to offer that to my close friends. Obviously, you'll want to create your own terms and conditions as you feel comfortable. but peer support is critical. Collaboration.
Can I just say, Alexis, peer support is why we encourage listening buddies, empathy buddies after our retreats.
Yes, that's exactly right. We do need each other. Yeah. I'll roll through them because I could carry on about each one too long.
Keep going.
I'm hoping you've got a pen to grab these. You've got safety, trustworthiness, transparency, peer support, collaboration, and mutuality. So that is, as you've described with your daughter, that you're working together, just like we do with our clients. We don't impose, this is what you must do. Together, we can find a way. Collaboration and mutuality, that you're on equal ground. Empowerment, voice and choice is considered essential, as it sounds again that you're doing that, providing her with the skills and the language to acknowledge her experience and to give voice to her choices. And the final aspect of, the final key principle of a trauma-informed approach is cultural, historical, and gender issues. And that in your case would really be around acknowledging her history. And in fact, I know this is a practice that I've used in clinical practice. Even a simple journaling exercise of drawing a timeline can be really wonderful for an adolescent to acknowledge, okay, well, when I was 6, this happened. And when I was 7, we moved here. And when I was 8, oh, that's when you met someone, just to create a sense of continuity and to make sense of, and be able to step back and see that coherent line would be acknowledging that she has her own history that is an integral part of her resolution.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll just quickly say that Dan Siegel published research recently that showed people in their 50s and 60s who'd gone back and made sense of their lives through whatever means, but maybe something like that, or through therapy or whatever, these people had better mental health just because they'd gone back and made sense of their lives. It's so important that we integrate and incorporate and own our own story, so we can help our kids do that. That's so great. I'm so glad you said that, Alexis. We're running out of time, aren't we?
We obviously need to speak about trauma again, Rachel, and there is a lot. It's emerging, and a lot of new evidence all the time. So yes, shall we move into a mindfulness practice, and we could even close on this if that works for you, Rach?
Sure. And this might even help Kirsten, who's asked the question, how do you keep your trauma reactions and dysregulation from impacting the people you work closely with? Perhaps this is something, if Kirsten's still listening, that she could do in the bathroom, in the ladies' room at work or something, just to manage dysregulation.
Yeah, that is interesting. We could even carry that one over, I think, Rachel, to our next one. But
okay, good. Let's do that.
So, as we do in our meditations, we always start with observation. So, just a really natural transition from your outer listening and engaging to a more internal or inward looking experience. The simplest way to do that is to notice when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out. You might even say to yourself as the breath comes in, and as it moves out, out. I invite you to hone your attention to the small area at your nostril entrance. And see that you might feel the very sensation of the breath coming in and moving out. Your own self-soothing own gentle lullaby. And just see that no matter what else is happening around you, you can use this gentle touch to connect with the calm eye, the very center of your experience. So that come what may, whatever feelings are to arise, whatever bodily sensations are to arise, whatever your experience, you can maintain a sense of continuity with yourself, a self-connection, a self-awareness, self-understanding. This very simple resting point, the touch of your breath. Thank you so much for making the time today, Dr. Rachel.
Thank you, Dr. Alexis, for making the time.
And thank you, listeners. We really value that you join us and that you bring your life experiences and your questions. And as Rachel said, life is hard and it is beautiful and it is often unexpected. And we do need each other. That much we know for sure. So we hope you continue to join us for a healthy dose of connection with each other and with yourself.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alexis. Thank you for all your offerings today. I think there's a couple of questions in the comments below, which I'm happy to answer when I get off. I'll type a thought or two down below. But I can see you're on holidays, so please go and enjoy the rest of your evening on your island.
Thank you. Yes, I'm here on Fraser. I think you might be able to see the bay. You would just be just over the bay there.
Beautiful.
Big moon up there tonight.
Just gorgeous.
I hope wherever you are, you're having a lovely Sunday. And Rachel, I hope you have a gorgeous evening.
Thank you so much. Okay, and we'll see everybody next Sunday evening.
Perfect. Okay, see you then.
Bye, everyone.